Hello everyone, and welcome to another R tutorial video. And in this video, we're going to finish up our discussion talking about joining data frames. And we're going to do that by talking about the join functions from DeepLiar. So the first thing we have to do is make sure that we have access to DeepLiar. So if you've never used DeepLiar on your computer before, you would have to start by doing install.packages and then DeepLiar. And this will grab the DeepLiar package from whatever repository you're using. Now, I already have DeepLiar on my computer, so I don't actually have to do that. So once you have it installed, as always, you have to do library and then DeepLiar. I'm actually going to clear our session here from previous videos. Library DeepLiar. Alright, so now we have all of the functions and such that come with the DeepLiar package available to us in the session. So just to sort of recap what we've done so far with joining data frames, in the previous video we talked about rbind and cbind and how rbind put the data sets on top of each other so that the additional data frames became new rows. And cbind put them sort of side by side so that the additional data frames became new columns. And we discussed the issue with those being that it doesn't really, R doesn't take into account what order the rows are in. It just sort of shoves them together. And so if you have two data frames that the order of the rows matters, right? Say you have census tracts, for example, and you are trying to join two data frames together based on census tracts, and you just use cbind, right? If the census tracts aren't in the right order, you could be combining data from one census tract with data from the wrong census tract in the other data frame. So the nice thing is that there are functions out there that can use unique IDs to make sure that when you join these data frames together, you're joining them based on a common identifier. And one of the most common is the join functions from DeepLiar. So we're going to go through and we're going to look at how this works. So we have access to the DeepLiar functions. We also need access to the iris data frame, which I'm going to just take, I'm going to steal that one from up there. So we now have a clean copy of the iris data frame. So the big thing here with the join functions is that each row in both data frames has to have a unique ID. And as you remember, we've been working with this iris dataset, that the iris dataset doesn't actually have that. Right, you might be tempted to use the species, but you have to remember that the species is not unique to each row. So what I want to do is I want to quickly create a copy of the iris dataset. That way we're not breaking the original data. And then I'm going to do something, and if you don't immediately follow along, that's fine. I'm just going to add in a unique ID for us. So we're actually going to take some of the concepts from our adding columns video, and we're going to create a column called unique ID in copy. And we're going to set that equal to something called sample, which is an R function that samples a set of numbers. And so we're going to sample numbers between 1 and 150. We're going to take 150 numbers out, and we're going to do that without replacements. All right, so it's not critical that you understand what this is doing, but this is basically just giving each row in copy a unique ID so that we can do the join properly. So now what I want to do here is I want to pull the data set apart so that we have all of the sepal data in one data frame and all of the petal data in another data frame. So we can do that pretty easily using the multiple values indexing that we've talked about before by taking copy. Actually, hold on. First, let's do sepal. Let's set it equal to something. So we're going to make a new data frame called sepal. And we're going to set that equal to all of the rows in copy. So we're going to leave the row numbers blank. And we're going to take the columns 1, 2, and 6. So just to make sure we're all on the same page here as to why we did what we did, let's take a look at the names we have for copy. So copy currently has sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width, species, and UID. So what we want is we want all of the rows, and we want the sepal information because we're working on a sepal data frame, and we want the UID so that we have that unique identifier. So that would be the first column, the second column, and the sixth column, which is where this 1, 2, and 6 come from. So we can run that really quickly. And then we're going to do the same thing with a petal data frame, which will be copy, and then we want all of the column or all of the rows, and we want columns 3, 4, and 6. And run that. I just want to clarify that we've left out that species column simply because I didn't want to include it. So we have two data frames, sepal and petal, that both have this unique ID column in common. So now what we can do is we can actually join these two things back together based on UID. So right now, they're technically in the right order, so we could just simply use cbind, but we're going to just imagine for a second that they weren't in the right order, right? That one of these data frames was shuffled, and the only thing they had in common was the unique ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to call a function from DeepLiar. So just in terms of readability, consistency, and accuracy, if I'm using a function that doesn't come from the base R, I always like to specify what package I'm pulling it from. So to do that, you type the name of the package, so in this case DeepLiar, because we're pulling in DeepLiar, and then 2 colons. So this will tell R, this will tell the reader, hey, what package are we specifying here? We're specifying DeepLiar. In DeepLiar, we are specifying the function left join. So I should take a minute here. There are several different types of join functions in DeepLiar, and they all work slightly differently in terms of the sort of priority that they give the different join data frames. But I always like to use left join because it's the one that in my mind makes the most sense, and it just sort of helps me make fewer mistakes. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this equal to a new data frame called join. And so what left join does is it takes in 3 parameters that you actually have to sort of worry about. It takes in a parameter x, a parameter y, and a parameter by. So the way that this works is the x parameter is the first data frame that you want to join. So in this case, we're going to start with sepal. And the reason that I always like to use left join is because left join makes the x data frame the master data frame. So what that means is that every row in x will be kept, right? In the output, all of the x rows will be retained. Y here is going to be the second data frame that we want to join. And because we used left join, x is the master. So what will happen here with y is if there's a row in y that doesn't have a match to x, it will actually be discarded. So only the y's that match x are going to be kept. If there are rows in x that don't have a match in y, any of the columns from y will be given an NA for that row because there's nothing to join. So again, hopefully this is clear here. The x rows will all be kept. Any y's that match x will be kept, and any x's that don't have a match in y, those rows will have an NA for any of the columns that are in y. So again, I just like to use left join because I think it's the way that my brain thinks. So the final parameter you need is this by parameter. And what the by parameter does is it says what column am I looking for in X and Y to use for this join? So in this case, that's going to be UID, right? And this is the column that we made to be the unique ID, and we know that it's in both of these. So this is the column that we're going to look for. So anytime it finds an X and a Y with the same unique ID, it's going to join them together. So we can run this, and then just really quickly recap what we've done. So we've created a new data frame called join. From the package DeepLiar, we use the function left join. We have the first data frame that we want to join, which is the master data frame, which is sepal. So that means all of the rows in sepal are going to come out in the output, along with the rows in Y, which is petal, that have a matching UID, right? So let's just say that again. All of the rows in X are going to be in the output, plus any rows in Y that are matched by UID. So what I want to do now is I want to just really quickly do our run through of the tests just to make sure that we have what we think we have. So first, as always, is to check the dimensions. So if we did our job right, we should have 150 rows and 5 columns. 150 rows, 5 columns. Looks pretty good. Next, I like to check the names to make sure that we have all of the data that we think we do. So the names of join. All right, so perfect. We have 5 names just like we expected. And I think this is a good time for me to explain one thing that left join, or any of the joins do. And that's that we only have one UID column in the output. So sepal length and sepal width came from the X data frame, or the sepal data frame. Petal length and petal width came from the Y data frame, or the petal data frame. But UID was found in both. And rather than keeping 2 columns, it just merged them together, so we just have the one UID column. So rather than having UID X and UID Y, we just have one UID. And then finally, just to make sure that we don't get anything weird, we'll just check the head of the data frame just to verify that all of the values came through the way we would expect. And you can see 5.1, 3.5, 1.4, and 0.2. And then just to sort of double check, because we didn't change the order here, the first row in join should match the first row in copy. So if we do copy indexed first row all columns, you'll see here that we have 5.1, 3.5, 1.4, 0.2, and 26. So it did indeed merge them together in the way that we expected. So I know this was a lot, and this is probably the most confusing part of this playlist. So if at any point you feel like you're confused about something, I encourage you to go back, rewatch the part you're confused about, and as always, please reach out. Thank you.